Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Let me tell you from experience that the deep web is a disgusting human cesspit. You don't know what lies in the darkest recesses of the human psyche until you go on there. Well, I learned that the hard way. I got suckered in by the crazy stories and hype that my friends gave it, so I wanted to see it for myself. So last week, I downloaded Tor and I started browsing. I didn't feel the need for any extra protection, being completely new to the entire concept. But in retrospect, I wish I had. I spent hours clicking link after link after link, and I was starting to get bored and a little freaked out. I had found a whole host of your typical crackheads searching for drugs, sites with hitmen for hire, and a shit ton of other military-grade weaponry. At one point, I found myself scrolling through post after post of vivid descriptions of animal abuse and how the sick fuckers who committed those atrocities get off to them every single night. I wish I had closed my computer right then and there, but something kept my curiosity alight. Honestly, I think some part of me just wanted to see how fucked up the human mind truly could be. After a few more links to child porn and a couple of drug markets, I had had enough. This is it, I sighed to myself. One more link, and I swear I'm getting out of this hellhole. I clicked the link, going blindly into what, unbeknownst to me, would alter my already cynical views on humanity. I mean, honestly, when you hear a guy go on and on about lighting his dog on fire, you tend not to think the best of people. But this was a whole new level of twisted. The first thing that caught my eye was the curly pink font that served at the title of the opening page. It read, "Peace and Love." I remember it all too clearly, as it seemed so out of place in that slum of human refuse, formerly known as the Deep Web. I scrolled down to find an image album and a simple chat box. No one was online at that moment, so I went ahead and I clicked the first set of pictures. I was not ready for what I was about to see. The very first picture was that of a young pregnant woman bawling her eyes out. She looked scrawny and thin, with cuts and bruises marring her pale skin. She looked scared and malnourished, like she was begging for her life. I clicked to the next photograph, and I nearly vomited. The young woman from before now sat in a chair. She was facing the camera, her dead, dull eyes boring into me. She was covered in blood, and her abdomen had been torn open. In her cold, unfeeling arms, she held a child, still attached at the umbilical cord. Its half-formed, lifeless body was a deep crimson with blood, and one could tell that it had been forcibly ripped from the womb. On the wall just behind them, written in their blood, were the words, "I gave them peace," in harsh, hasty letters. I don't know what possessed me to scrolling through the photo. It was as if I couldn't control my own facilities. The image only got more and more grotesque as I looked further. The following images seemed to be a time-lapse of the decomposition of the body. I watched them rot, sitting there together. I watched the face of the mother, which could have once been considered beautiful, just wither and collapse in on itself as a fetid mound of flesh. And by the end of the series of images, there were nothing but desiccated skeletons. I would have noped the fuck out of there had it not been for the message that popped up on my screen. It was from the website chat. It read exactly as follows. Hello there. Do you like what you see? Do you want more? Do you want to attain true peace? I didn't know how to respond. I was rooted to my chair with fear. Then, the seagull spoke again. You don't have to be scared, Zachary. I love you. I want to help you. Let me help you. I managed to type a simple question. How in the name of hell do you know my name? Almost immediately I got a response. I know everything about you. You know, you really shouldn't leave your curtains open like that. You get a draft. You see, I just want to help you. Please, just let me save you. My eyes flashed to the uncovered window behind me to the light of my webcam. My heart skipped a beat when I realized that it was on. This sick person was watching me. I made a move to pull the plug on this sick son of a bitch when another message popped up. Come on, don't try to shut me out. I'll bring you peace. I swear, Zachary Tanner. It's the only real bliss in this world. That was the last message that I got before I finally shut it off. Needless to say, I stayed off the internet for a long while after that. And just today that I got back on, praying to God that it would have been all blown over. Oh, how wrong I was. I logged into my email only to find it spammed with emails from an account named I'll Show You Peace. Each one had the same message on it. I want to save you. I want to love you. I want to bring you peace. In all caps. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Each and every message had a candid photo of me taken within the last week. I've tried to involve the police, but they haven't been much help. So, what do I do? During my first year of college, I was introduced to the Tor browser by my new roommate Ricky. Those of you who have been around the internet for long enough know the Tor is a browser engine used to help you access the dark web, to which we frequently did. For a barely 20-year-old dude experiencing his first moments of living away from home, being handed a way to access nearly whatever I wanted just from the press of a few keys felt like being handed absolute freedom. While we mostly just used it for accessing pirated games and films, or maybe visiting a banned website, there were times that I've found myself on the more twisted side of it all. I've honestly seen some pretty messed up shit that I really didn't want or need to see other than to satisfy my morbid curiosity of it. And while I mostly regret these deeper dives into the dark web, one such dive might have very well saved my life. It was about 2 a.m. on a Friday during the end of my third year of college, and Ricky had been spending the night at a cousin's house, leaving me to myself. I had been scrolling through the web, going through various shady movie sites, and running games that I didn't technically own, when I got a strange pop-up ad. It said, "One-time auction, limited items, one of a kind. Get now or never again. Don't miss out on these items." It read in a flashing red and green Comic Sans font. Now, I've gone to a few of these dark web auctions, even participated in a few out of impulse, bidding on things that triggered something in my dumb college dude brain. This ranged from things like overly engraved gold handguns that you would see Tony Montana strapping, 2 pounds of the finest weed grown in the purest soils of Jamaica, just to give me that little adrenaline rush of, dude, what if I actually get it? Granted that I only ever bid 10, maybe $20 tops, knowing actually winning any of it would probably land me behind bars. I wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, and I would have been busted within minutes of receiving the package. This one would be different, however. I decided that I would check out the auction and click the link before browsing through the bids. At first, it wasn't anything serious, mostly firearms and drugs, typical black web catalog. But as I moved down the list, the items got more extreme, much more extreme. The list started with simple low-caliber handguns that you could get at Walmart in some states. But they quickly changed to sniper rifles and LMGs fit for military elites. Till I was eventually being offered small nuclear explosives, claiming to have enough power to level small towns to ash and brimstone. There was super strong pot and funny mushrooms that quickly turned to advertisements for pounds of Colombian cocaine to 10-pound boxes of fentanyl pills. Shadiest of all were what I assume are experimental drugs, black and yellow sludge-like substances held in test tubes that didn't even have real names, just a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. And judging by the descriptions, these things fry your brain, considering that the people selling it explain the effects through mostly incoherent, barely understandable sentences, implying that they've been indulging on their own supply. I remember one going along the lines of, fun green bubbles, when super cool if eaten, it's like green, blue, green bubbles, they fly up, eat, and up and fly down with the green bubbles. I might be paraphrasing on that, but trust me, it wouldn't have made any more sense than if I did get it spot on. Eventually, I reached what I took to be the Hitman and Murderer catalog. Poison brews of resin and cyanide, claiming to have zero scent or taste, soundproof sneakers, weapon silencers, fake aliases, and passports. People were even selling codes that were apparently instructions on how to get to areas in your location where bodies are most often hidden and never found. There were even other codes that were labeled as instructional tapes made by professionals on how to get away with various types of murder, to even murders. If you didn't want to do the work yourself, you could buy the phone number to a top-class hitman near you who will make sure your job is done effectively. Things only got worse when I scrolled to the next page to see photos of people, some even children, with their names listed underneath. They were advertising human trafficking and given each of their product a small biography of sorts, as if they were stat cards. It listed everything from the address to allergies, the strength, the weaknesses, even down to the daily routine. Now, I've seen these kinds of blackroom type things and was well aware of how sick people can be on the dark web, but seeing it never got any less unsettling, especially reading some of the things these bidders wanted to do with the product once they got their hands on them. This unsettlement quickly turned to unimaginable, agonizing fear as I scrolled down to see my own portrait, one taken on my first day of college. I began to panic as I read off my card. Whoever these people were, they knew my name, my age, race, height, weight, even down to my small birthmark behind my ear. Not only that, but they seemed to have known my whole life story from birth. My panic only grew wider as I saw that there were already 4 bidders, and the highest of which bidding almost 15 grand. The sickest part were these bidders left comments, things like, he would fit well with my collection. I can't wait to have his body. I wish to taste his skin. Along with a slew of horrible, deranged shit that they wanted to do with me that I really don't want to repeat. I fell back and I began to hyperventilate. It felt like my heart was gonna give out and my brain was gonna explode, thinking of all the horrible things that may happen to me at the hands of these sick, twisted people who look to take ownership of my life. Most of the rest of the night was a blur. I remember bidding 20K off the bat to top the list, then periodically bidding, I think, another 3, and what felt like every 30 minutes till I reached to almost 40K. After that, I must have blacked out, because the next thing that I remember was waking up curled into a ball under my desk in a puddle of cold sweat. It was still dark out, so the flashing lights coming from my monitor were all too noticeable. I could feel myself shaking in fear as I slowly crawled out from under the desk before slowly looking at my screen and seeing in large red Comic Sans that says, "Congratulations, you win. Please list where you would like to send your prize. We will send an agent to deliver your package." I felt an overwhelming amount of relief wash over my body, seeing that I had just bought myself. Sure, I ended up putting myself in near debt before I even finished school. But I'm alive, and I'm free, knowing those vile fucks wouldn't be able to live out their fantasies was enough for me to forget about any possible money problems. I even started laughing like a madman for a second as I entered. "Leave them be. I bought them their freedom so they don't suffer." Hoping that would be enough explanation, and thankfully it was, as I was answered rather quickly with another message. "Understood. Your product will be removed from all auctions and marked as sold. Thank you for your purchase, Evan." Reading that caused me to nearly collapse, as if all the stress and tension built up drained from my body, only to quickly return as I reread the message. They knew that I just bid on myself. They were still freaking watching. The next couple of months were a living hell of paranoia and anxiety. I tried to explain what I could to Ricky, and he did his best to help calm me down, but it was fruitless. Eventually though, after enough time, I was able to move on from it. More so, I think my mind forced me to block it out. But it's all come back now, thanks to an email that I had just received from Ricky, almost 8 years after that night. "Please help. I don't have the money to go up against the highest bidder." I responded as quickly as possible, asking for him to send me his PayPal or something. That was 2 days ago. I haven't gotten a response. I think he lost the auction. They say that 99% of the internet is not accessible to traditional browsers. The world that lives beneath that which we see when we visit the dark web contains things which defy normal understanding. It has become a breeding ground to all of man's most perverse and dark fantasies. It's a place where chaos reigns supreme. My mother is not an extremely savvy internet user. In fact, most of the time, she has little to no idea what she's doing on there. If she's in someone else's YouTube account or Gmail, she often does what she's trying to do without paying attention to whose credentials she's using. Can you blame her though? Her generation didn't grow up with computers. They are severely disadvantaged when it comes to that kind of stuff. I, on the other hand, somewhat pride myself on being knowledgeable about computers and the internet. I don't know how I would live my life without the opportunities that it affords me. One could easily assume, then, that I would be someone who would take an interest in the dark web. And believe me, it's not for the faint of heart. Now the thing is, I am very careful with what I do. I use a great VPN service, and I know what I can and can't click in order to not expose my IP address to anyone. After years of doing this though, I did however become a bit too careless, and it just so happens that the time that I did, I was on my mom's computer. I was hanging with my family during the holidays, and I got into an argument with my little brother Tommy about a certain listing that I had seen on a dark net market search. He's always been a bit of a sheltered kid, considering he has a cleft lip and my parents baby him like a toddler. So I figured that it was my responsibility to show him some of the real world every once in a while. I had told him about this listing for a clown that you could hire for birthday parties that was for some reason being advertised on the dark web, and he of course didn't believe me. So I showed him the listing, and we read about how the clown would provide your party with an exceptional experience, one that you would likely never forget. But considering my knowledge of the dark web, I was pretty sure that it was not an experience that you would want to remember. After I showed him, I got distracted and I went about my business doing other things. Somehow though, I left my browser window open on my mom's computer. This was hands down the worst, most careless slip-up of my life, one that I will likely never live down. After I was done on there, she used the laptop, and thinking that the clown was something that my little brother wanted to do for his birthday, she went ahead and paid for him to come visit the house. After I found out what she had done, we tried to cancel it. But I guess it didn't work because that weekend, a clown car pulled up out front of our house for Tommy's birthday. Out of the car stepped an old man in traditional clown makeup with these pale bluish white eyes like those of a blind person. Yet, he seemed to be able to walk up the driveway totally fine. My mom was very freaked out, and I had my dad go meet him in the driveway. When my dad approached him, he tried to shake his hand, but instead, the clown just immediately pulled out 3 juggling balls and started tossing them up effortlessly. My dad stared at him for a moment in awe, then began to guide him around the side yard into the back, where the rest of the party guests were. I was definitely a bit worried, so I went to the backyard, and the clown was already setting up for a magic show. The guy looked freaky as hell, but everyone in the crowd seemed okay with it. So, I supposed I was being too judgmental and should just let him do his show. Plus, he had a name tag on that said noisy. And considering that he hadn't said a word the whole time, I thought that was pretty funny. For the first trick, Noisy took a quarter out and he pretended like it disappeared in his hand. Then, he reached around the back of his head and pulled the quarter out from behind his ear. It was a pretty basic trick, but then he kept going with it. He pulled out quarter after quarter from behind his ear until there was a pile of change at least a few inches high on the ground beside of him. Everyone in the yard seemed impressed when they saw this. It was really an incredible trick. Then, he picked up the pile of change off of the ground and put it in his shirt. Then, he held the shirt up with his 2 fingers and launched the coins up into the air, only nothing flew out. The change had totally disappeared, and in its place, a bunny rabbit popped out. The crowd really got into this. A few of them even got up and started putting money into his tip jar. Then, Noisy extended his hand out and pointed to Tommy. Tommy smiled, excited to have been acknowledged, and then stepped up. Noisy then pulled out one of those huge bubble-making wands and had Tommy stand in his round tray of soap on the ground. Noisy then lowered the wand over Tommy and lifted it back up quickly, covering him in a gigantic bubble. This was not an ordinary bubble though. It would not pop no matter what, and Tommy would hit the side of it and it wouldn't break. Everyone in the audience stared at this speechless. Clearly, they were watching something that wasn't possible occurring before their eyes. But after a few seconds of being trapped inside, Tommy started to freak out and then thrash against the side of the bubble. He began screaming and crying and panicking. "Hey, let him out!" my dad yelled as he started approaching the clown. Noisy then looked over at him and put his finger to his lips, shushing him. He then lifted the wand up above my brother's head and quickly brought it down over him. The bubble instantly disappeared, and so did Tommy. Frantic, my dad charged toward Noisy, but just before he could get to him, the clown brought the bubble wand down over himself and vanished as well. My dad screamed, frantically looking around for the two of them, and realizing the gravity of the situation, the crowd began to stand up and tried to help my dad look for them. Then, we heard a car start up in the driveway. Several of us sprinted to the front yard and saw the clown car pulling out and taking off down the street. My dad and I, along with several others, got into our cars and peeled out, chasing after him. Then, the clown car turned a corner, and by the time we got there, it had vanished. Upon the realization that we had lost him, my dad immediately broke down in tears, screaming and pounding on the steering wheel. I had never seen him get like that before, and I knew it was all my fault. The following weeks were some of the worst that I have ever experienced. Constant contact with the police, and then interviews, where everyone was relentless asking me about why I was on the dark web and what I knew about my little brother's disappearance. I honestly feel like I was lucky that they didn't pin the entire thing on me and just close the case. I didn't stop going on the dark web though. In fact, I started using it more. I knew that if there was any way that I was going to find my brother's kidnapper, it was going to be using the old-fashioned police detective model. I had to track Noisy down once he decided to stalk again. So, I created various fake identities on numerous darknet markets and made posting after posting for birthday party clowns to come perform at my son's party. Then finally, after several weeks of doing this, I got a response. Only, it wasn't from Noisy. It was from another old man, dressed as a clown, who included a picture of himself in the posting with his response. The weirdest thing was, though, the old man had a cleft lip and looked just like my little brother, only he had aged at least 50 years. I was really freaked out by this and had to know more, but after I posted several times for him to meet me, I think he could tell that I was trying to trick him because he would never show up. I am going to continue to look for him as long as I can, but I think he knows it's me, and for some reason, he doesn't want to be found. Remember when deep web stories were the fad? Every week, you would find a new tale of someone going too far on the deep web, finding something terrible, and then ending up getting attacked for speaking out against it. This story is a bit similar. The difference is, I still love the deep web. Let me explain. I was a senior in high school at that time. I was definitely no popular kid. My friends were the oddities of the school, the few people who dared to defy the norm. It was them who told me about the deep web, a place on the internet where you are completely unwatched, anonymous, and capable of doing whatever you want. Of course, I was intrigued. Most of my friends just used it to buy drugs, but I thought a little bigger. I wanted to know what happened in the darkest parts of the deep web. Whether or not my friends were telling the truth when they talked about horrible fetish sites and assassins that you can hire to kill anyone you like. Of course, I wasn't planning on using any of it. I've never been particularly interested in sex, so fetish sites don't interest me. And there's really nobody I'd like to kill. It was the mystery of it all that fascinated me. Going to these sites would be like peering into a side of the world that only a few have ever seen. It was like a wholly new experience. At that time, I was tired of the monotony of life. I'd get up the same time every day, go to school, attend the same classes, talk to the same people, and then I would go home, play some games, do my homework, go to sleep, and then it would just repeat. I wondered if other people got tired of that. Anyway, it took me a while to actually dive into the deep web. As fascinated as I was, I'd been warned of what could happen to me. I read the stories and I talked about it too. Who isn't afraid of being threatened by hackers or stalked by some creepy piss-off online, right? That kind of shit kept me from actually going on the deep web. Until the day that I manned up and decided that it was time to break the monotony. It was time to delve into the underbelly of the internet. Time to see a world that I had only dreamed of. Well, for the first week or so, it was freaking boring. It was just drug sites and stuff where people expose government secrets or whatever. Nothing as dark as I expected. I don't even do drugs, so that was useless to me, and I wasn't into politics. There wasn't really much I was into back then, so I was disappointed. The only reason I kept exploring was my sheer desire to experience the world that I thought existed on the deep web. That world was darker than any drug site, the world that had murder, torture, messed up porn for fucked up people, and all sorts of nasty shit. I eventually got my wish. Just when my apathy towards the deep web got to its highest point, I found what I was looking for. The site didn't have a name. I thought it was a broken link for a bit, since it only led me to a black screen. But right before I could click out, a chat box opened on the screen. Someone using the name admin typed in the chat box saying, "Congrats, you found the worst place on the fucking internet." I stared at the screen, more bemused than afraid. It took me a moment to type back, but I said, "Cool." That's all I said. What else was there to say? That I'm here to see your finest torture porn? A moment after, the admin replied, "Do you want in?" I hesitated, all those horror stories flooding back into my head. But it was too late to chicken out. This was what I came for. Even if I just clicked out at the first sign of danger, I had to see what was there. I had to break the fucking monotony, and I had to know. So I hastily typed back, not allowing myself to stop. "Yeah." The chat box closed, and I was led directly to what looked like a video, with another chat box next to it. There were around 5 other people there, each eagerly waiting for something. The video was in black and white and showed a small room. The only thing inside was a wooden chair. Until after around 5 minutes of waiting, the door to the room opened. A man was shoved inside, blindfolded and naked, save for a pair of black briefs. He was followed by a woman, and this one dressed all in black and her face covered by a mask. In an instant, the chat room went wild. I almost closed the window to spare myself, knowing immediately where this was going. But again, I told myself that this was what I wanted. Maybe not the torture, but the window into the very worst parts of the world. The woman pulled a knife from her pocket and cut off the man's blindfold as she shoved him into the chair. He didn't struggle for a moment, and once his eyes were visible, I could see why. It looked like he had been drugged. Resisting was literally impossible. I frowned, glancing to the side. This was fucked up. I knew this was messed up. My conscience told me to call the cops, or at least to click out, but I forced myself to watch. She turned to the camera, pointing the knife at the man's throat. One of the people in the chat typed, "One of his fingers! Cut off one of his fingers!" I clenched my hand into fist, taking in a sharp breath. Was this really happening? Was I gonna just watch as this guy got mutilated, as a small crowd of people watched in glee? I felt like throwing up, a feeling that only worsened when the woman nodded and turned to the man, grabbing his limp hand and carefully slicing one of his fingers. Blood spurted out from the wound, and the man moaned in pain, but he couldn't fight back. Breathing heavily, I hovered my cursor over the axe, planning on getting the fuck out of there. But I didn't. The woman looked unimpressed, as if she thought that the people in the chat could do better. Another person called for a slice up the man's arm, and she complied. He was bleeding heavily now, clearly in deep pain, but these people were freaking sick. They were cheering her on from chat, suggesting new and painful tortures for her to inflict. And eventually, I stopped breathing heavily. I stopped feeling sick. It was starting to grow on me. And by the end, the man was on the ground, covered in blood and breathing heavily. I watched this for around half a minute. The people in the chat were starting to die down. They'd inflicted enough pain, and they had their fun. It seemed like things were wrapping up. Funny, I thought, how it was over just when I was getting into it. I smirked. This was exciting. This was better than any game that I could play. Much better than any freaking class that I could attend. Better than sitting with a group of fucking nobodies, pretending like I cared for a goddamn second about them. This was the world that I wanted to see. This was darkness. This was the underbelly. This was reality. Fucking end him. Slit his throat. I type in the chat for the first time. She nodded for one last time, bringing the man to his feet before slowly dragging her blade across his throat, sending more of his blood spreading out. Once it was done, she dropped him and he fell to the ground limp. He was dead. The people in the chat started complimenting the torturer, talking about how it had been another good time, starting to set a date for the next showing. On screen, the woman left the room, leaving the corpse behind. Of course, I hastily wrote down the date for the next showing. This was going to be part of my life now. I was going to be part of something bigger. I was going to command these people's deaths. What a rush. So yeah, I still love the deep web. I'm in college now, and now I'm even more immersed in the deep web. I have seen shit some people would freak out just knowing exists. I've fucked around every sick porn site known to man. I've finally broken the monotony of life. Inspirational, right? How one high schooler defies the boredom inherent in his life by discovering his true passion. I love the deep web. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.